Welcome back. We're on to another lesson in Chapter 2, learning about insects and spiders. We're going to be starting on page 40, and we're going to go all the way to page 43. We're going to be talking about a group of insects called social insects, and I will explain that as we go along in our lesson today. But before we do, let's do a little review on what we learned the last time in our lesson. Up here I have on the board some pictures of the different stages of a butterfly. Now, we learned yesterday this big word. Can you remember what that was? It starts with an M. Now, if you guessed metamorphosis, you're correct. So this is one kind of metamorphosis. Okay, let's say that one more time with me. Metamorphosis. But like I said, we have two different kinds. Now, one has 3 stages, one has 4 stages. So this one, you can see here we have 4 different pictures, we have 4 different stages. Can you remember which one had 4 different stages? Well, if you said complete, that is correct. Complete metamorphosis. Can we say that? Complete metamorphosis. That has 4 stages. Now, we have an adult butterfly here, and this is probably a female, and what she does is she goes around and she lays the eggs. You might not be able to see it from where you're looking, but there are 2 small eggs underneath a plant, maybe a leaf of some sort. And when it's ready, this fertilized egg will open into a larva. Okay, and it kind of looks like a worm. You might look at it and say that's a caterpillar, which is correct. But it's the scientific word is called larva. Now, its job is to eat and to get bigger and to eat and to eat and to eat and to eat until it's ready to attach itself upside down on maybe a tree branch. And like I mentioned before, and I hope you got to see that video of how a butterfly goes through metamorphosis. It will change into kind of like a J shape, and then it will shed or take off its outer skin and begin to form this very hard covering around its body. And it does a lot of changing. It goes from to a worm-like creature, and it begins to form into those different body sections, the 3 body sections, because it's an insect. And when it's ready, like I said, it emerges into another adult. And if it's a female, it will begin laying its eggs over again, and the cycle begins again. Remember, the word cycle is kind of another word for circle. You want to think of a bicycle. A bicycle has 2 wheels. So think of a circle. It's going kind of in a circle pattern from birth to adult and then eventually death. But that hopefully that adult will reproduce and make more. So this is complete metamorphosis. Complete metamorphosis. So what was the other one? That's right, incomplete metamorphosis. Now, this one is complete, but incomplete only has 3 stages. Now, they both start with the same. They both start with an egg, but when that egg opens in incomplete, it looks like a tiny adult. For instance, a grasshopper would be an example of that would look like a tiny adult. And that tiny adult is called a nymph or immature insect. And that nymph will molt, meaning remove its exoskeleton because it's too small, many, many times before it becomes an adult. But the different stages of nymph is still considered one stage. So we have egg, nymph, adult, and that is incomplete metamorphosis. Okay, so we're going to go on in our lesson today learning more about insects. And I mentioned that these insects, for instance, bees, are what we call social insects. And now a social insect, you think somebody that is social, likes to be around people or likes to be in a group. Well, these insects are the same way. They need to be in a group in order to get their basic needs. And can you remember from chapter 1? What are the 3 basic needs? Food, water, protection. So these particular insects they can't get their basic needs if they're by themselves. They would end up dying if they were all alone. So they need to live in a group in order to meet those basic needs. And they are called social insects. Some examples, bees. And bees are other insects that look like bees, for instance, wasps, or what we call yellow jackets. They're similar looking to bees, and they go through the same life cycle and live in colonies just like honeybees do. Another one would be an ant. Ants live in a group or a colony. They are social insects. They can't meet their needs on their own. And we'll learn about some more insects as we go along in this lesson. So let's read together and I'll explain. Insects were created with instincts. An instinct is a knowledge or skill that an animal is born with. Most insects have the instincts needed to live alone, but some have instincts needed to live and work together. These insects are called social insects. A group of insects that live together is called a colony. Bees, ants, wasps, and termites are some, not all, there are many, of the social insects. The insects in a colony work together, meaning each insect has a job to do. They provide food, meaning they gather food, they make the shelter and protection for all the insects in the colony. A social insect could not survive alone and meet its needs. Okay, so there was a word in here that I want you to pay attention to, and that word is instinct. Let's say that word together. Instinct. Now, all animals have some kind of instinct, meaning it's something that they know or something that they do, meaning how they build their home, that they already know. It's already in their brain when they're born. They don't have to be taught that. An example would be, do you need to tell a bird where to go when they migrate or move to a warmer climate? No, they already know how to do that. Do you need to teach a bee to make a beehive? No, it already knows how to do that. That is its instinct. Okay, instinct, meaning they already are born with this knowledge to do this skill. Okay, and so all animals have some type of instinct that they follow. Let's continue on in our lesson. Honeybees. Honeybees are a well-organized group. Every bee has a job to do in the colony. The queen bee lays eggs. She makes sure that the colony always has enough workers. The worker bees are female or girl bees. They build the hive or their home and find food. They also make the honey and take care of the eggs and larvae. The drones are male or boy bees that mate with the queen. Worker bees do certain tasks or certain jobs by instinct. They already know how to do it. The worker bees produce or make wax to build the hive. The wax comes out of the worker's abdomen. The workers use the wax to make thousands of six-sided cells called hexagons. Okay? These cells are used to store and protect the eggs, or store honey and protect the eggs. So a hexagon is a six-sided object. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you can see on page 41 the shape, this hexagon shape, as they make their hive, all of these thousands of little shapes form together to make their hive. And you might wonder, why did they use a hexagon, or why did God make their instinct to make a hexagon instead of maybe a circle or a square? Well, you think about it, this way, all the space is used up. No space is wasted. And they can fit a lot of things inside this shape. And I apologize if you cannot see it. I'll move my podium. All right. All of these cells, we'll call them, pieced together to make what we call a honeycomb, or their hive. Right, this is their hive. And this shape is used because, number one, it's very, very strong when they put this shape together. And two, they can use as much more space here. Nothing is wasted to use to store for honey or to put the larvae and the eggs inside of these. So nothing is wasted. Now you think about it. What if we had circles? What if the bees use circles? And we put these circles together. So see here, the space inside is smaller, but also there is space wasted here. Okay? Also, well, you thought maybe, why didn't they use a square? Why didn't they make it that way? Nothing is wasted here, but in this case, it's not very strong. It would break very easily, and then they wouldn't have a home anymore. So God, in His wisdom, created their instincts to build a hexagon. All right, so we talked about the different bees in a hive or in a colony, and I have a picture of these different bees that I want to show you. Okay. All right, so I'm going to bring it up close so you can see. And you'll notice that these different bees are different sizes. Now you'll notice the largest one, this is the queen bee. And she's large for a reason, because she is always laying eggs. That is her job, to lay eggs to make workers for the hive. She has to eat a lot. She has a special diet. In fact, I'm going to have a link connected to my video, and you'll find the link below my video that you can click on and learn about the different things that the bees eat in order to become a queen bee and to become a worker bee or a drone bee. It's very, very interesting. Down here, you have the worker bee. Now, all worker bees are girls or female, and they have lots of things to do. Some workers, they build the hive. Some workers, they collect nectar and pollen to make the food that they need. Some worker bees, they protect the queen. Some worker bees, they are taking care of the larvae and the eggs. So each worker bee has a specific job to do to meet the needs of the hive. Then we have one more here at the top. This is what we call the drone bee. The drone bee is a boy bee, or he is male. And his job is to mate with the queen so she can lay eggs. Now, that's his only job, but it's an important job. Otherwise, we wouldn't have any new bees to replace the worker bees that would die. Okay, so queen, worker, and drone. Queen, worker, and drone. You also have an example of that in your book. All right, let's continue on and let's see what a bee does in its hive or as a group. The workers are also good harvesters. They gather pollen from flowers. They carry the pollen in little pockets on each back leg. These pockets are called pollen baskets, or you can think of them as pockets. The pollen is used to make food for the bees. The worker bees also gather nectar from flowers. The workers use nectar to make honey. At first, the honey is thin and runny, meaning it can pour easily like water. The bee fans the honey with their wings to thicken it. It's cooling down the temperature of the honey, and it causing some of the liquid to evaporate, and it makes the honey thicker. The taste and color of honey depend on which flowers the bees gather the nectar from. So if a bee gathers nectar from an orange tree or an orange blossom tree, it will kind of have an orange flavor. If it gathers it from a clover flower, it will have kind of a clover flavor. So depending on where they gather their nectar is how that honey will taste. Honeybees can communicate or kind of talk to each other. When a bee finds a rich source of pollen or nectar, it returns to the hive or their home and does a special dance. The dance is a kind of map that tells how to get the pollen or nectar. The map gives not only the direction and distance to the source, but also the time of day. The other bees can understand the map or the dance and follow it. Now, if you do click on that extra link that is at the bottom of my video, it will show you a demonstration of how these worker bees will do this dance. And the longer the dance, the farther away the nectar is. And the direction that they go will tell the direction on where the other workers need to go. It's really, really interesting. I hope you get a chance to look at that. Now, I want to go back to my picture of the bees that I showed you. Okay, I apologize. Let's go back to the bee. It said it had these little baskets on its leg. We're going to go back to the worker bee. The workers are always busy doing something. So you see down here, okay, you see this kind of white, maybe yellowish color sac on their legs? That is the pollen basket. And as they're gathering nectar, they're also gathering pollen, and they're putting that pollen in that basket. And it can get rather big. If you do some research on bees and the pollen basket, some bees, it gets really, really fat, this little pocket. And when they're gathering nectar, sometimes they have to go to thousands of different flowers to get enough nectar to take it back to the hive. And their abdomen will get really, really swollen and heavy. In fact, their abdomen can weigh as much as the whole bee itself after they're done collecting the nectar they need. So they bring that back to the hive so they can mix this together to make food for the whole hive, for the other worker bees, for the larvae, for the eggs, so they have nutrients. And it's very interesting in this video, if you take a look at it, depending on what they eat will determine whether or not this larvae will become a queen or will it become a worker. And also, will it become male or female? It's really, really interesting. I hope you get a chance to watch it. All right. So let's go on and learn about another social insect called the ant. All right. It says in Proverbs chapter 6, 6 through 8, the Bible uses the ant's action as an example of being wise. The ant does its work faithfully, meaning nobody has to tell it what to do. It does it without being watched. It prepares well by finding and storing food when food is plentiful, or meaning when there is a lot of food. For example, in the summer and the fall, they would gather lots of food. Like bees, ants are social insects, meaning they work in a group. They share the work in their colonies. The queen ant lays the eggs. The male ant's his only job is to mate with the queen. The soldier ants are female ants, meaning girl ants, that protect the members of the colony. The worker ants are also female. The worker ants do many tasks or jobs. They may husk seeds or take out the good part of the seed, or dig new tunnels. They may care for the eggs or be in charge of feeding the larvae. An ant colony consists of many ants working together to form a single society, meaning a single colony or a group of ants. Before we go on, I wanted to show you the different kinds of ants. This is one kind of ant. This is the black ant. You can see here the largest ant is the queen ant. All right, she's the largest one, of course. She is going to make all of these eggs. The next one, we can call him just a male ant, or we can call him a drone ant. His only job is to mate with the queen so she can reproduce more eggs. Then we have a worker ant. All right, he's kind of small, but that's okay. He has many, or she, I apologize, they are a girl. They have lots of jobs to do, like digging the tunnels, taking care of the larvae and the eggs, and all sorts of things. And then we have the soldier one. This one, the soldier is a little bit larger, but not as big as the queen. But the soldier, you think about what a soldier would do that protects a country. Well, the soldier ant protects the colony from other predators that might destroy the colony or hurt them. So these are the different kinds of ants in a colony, and they all have a job to do. Without one of them, the colony wouldn't survive. Okay? All right, so let's learn about a different kind of ant. It's called the leafcutter ant. Leafcutter ants are an interesting kind of ant. These ants live mostly in tropical rainforests in South America and Central America. The soldier leafcut ants have big heads and sharp jaws, meaning their mouths are really sharp. They protect the colony's nest. They also stand guard for the other ants as they work. So they protect not only their home, but as the worker ants are working, they make sure that they're safe. Small worker ants give the whole group its leafcutter name, and you can see a picture of this in your book. These workers cut up leaves and carry the pieces home on their back. You can see this. They travel in long lines. As the ants go back and forth between the forest and the nest, they look like little conveyor belts in a busy factory. So it's just never ending. They're carrying leaves and going back for more, carrying leaves and going back for more. Back at the nest, the ants carry the pieces of leaves down the many tunnels. However, they don't eat the leaves. The worker ants give the leaves to the smallest ants in the nest. These are leaf preparers, meaning they prepare the leaf because they're going to make food from this leaf. They make the leaves into a gooey mulch, meaning they chew it up and it makes kind of like a paste. And a fungus grows in the mulch. And now fungus is a kind of organism that we'll learn about in the 6th grade. We don't have to worry about that. But it is another kind of organism that grows in this gooey mixture. The ants eat the fungus. The leafcutter ants are like farmers. They grow the fungus to provide food for the whole colony to eat. So they don't eat the leaves, they just cut them and they chew it up, and then fungus grows in this gooey mixture. And then they eat the fungus as their food source. Another kind of ant is commonly called the dairy ant. Now, do you think that these dairy ants are like dairy cows and give milk? No, not in this case. But they kind of act like a dairy farmer. These ants keep herds or groups of aphids, and an aphid is a different kind of insect, just as some people keep herds of dairy cows. The ants stroke the aphids with their antennae. So you can see here a little cartoon picture in your book. These are what we call aphids. They're tiny little insects, and then the antennas of these dairy ants, they will kind of tickle the aphids. This tickling or stroking causes the aphid to release or to give a sweet liquid called honeydew. Now you might have heard of a fruit called honeydew, but that's different. This is a liquid that comes from these aphids. And then the ants eat the honeydew. So the liquid that these aphids make, that is their food resource. Social insects survive by working together in colonies. By sharing tasks, they are able to accomplish the things they could not do alone. But the insects did not decide to behave this way. They lived this way because God gave them the instincts to do so. All right, before we finish up our lesson, I wanted to show you a couple more pictures of the life cycle of a bee and an ant. So here, this is going back to the bees. This is the queen ant, and she's laying an egg inside one of those hexagons in the hive. So this is kind of like they cut the top off of a hive so you can look down into the hive. So she's laying an egg, and that egg will hatch into a larvae. Now the worker bees make sure that the larvae get the food that it needs. The larvae begins to change and develop into the 3 body sections. You can start to see the head, the thorax, and the abdomen, and then starts to gain color, and when it's ready, it comes out. After 21 days, it will come out as an adult. Now, depending on what it eats, it will turn into either a queen or a worker or a drone, depending on what it eats. So I really encourage you to watch that video that I will have linked below. All right, similar to a bee, here we have the ant life cycle. Okay, so here's the queen ant. She's the largest. She's female. She lays eggs. the eggs will hatch into larvae. The larvae will begin to grow, and this is the pupa stage, and will begin to form the 3 body sections. And when it's ready, it will either become one of these insects depending on what it eats. Okay. All right, so to help you understand more about what we just learned today, I encourage you to do the 2 questions on page 43 in your book, and also activity manual page 32. Something that you can do at home. I'm pretty sure I mentioned this before. If you haven't looked at it, you should look at your student book, page 36. And I have given this challenge to my students in my class that they design their own insect. So if you look at page 36 and 37, in order for it to be an insect, it has to have the 3 body sections, and antenna and the 6 legs. But it encourages you to make a brand new insect, something that has never been made before, but just make sure it has those parts of an insect. Your creativity is your own. You can do whatever you want to do and make it out of whatever you want to make it with. If you look in your activity manual on page 27 and 28, it gives you some questions on what or how you can design your insect. So I encourage you to do those 2 activity manual pages first, 27 and 28, before you make your insect. I encourage you, this is a fun project every year. My students really love doing this. So I hope you have a good day and continue learning about insects and spiders.